And I forgot the show open, but welcome to Surviving the Survivor, the podcast that brings you the best guests in all of true crime. And today does not disappoint with these two amazing women. Welcome to STS. If it's your first time here, I'm not the usual host. I am just filling in. My name is Ileana. I'm also known as the COE here at STS. For full disclosure, I am married to the host, Joel Waldman, who's on the road. So for today, I am filling in. I'm also a former network news correspondent who took a break from news to raise my 3 kids, 2 dogs, and maybe my husband. So here I am today, and I am here with these amazing 2 women. And there are no 2 people that know Chad Daybell and his story better than these 2 women. First, here up top on the right is Lauren from Hidden True Crime. Lauren has been there. I know many of you guys have been following her, and she's been there on the ground covering everything, not just for this trial, but for the Lori Vallow trial as well. You've also seen Lauren on Dateline, on Law and Crime, on News Nation. So thank you so much for being here, Lauren.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
And then we have Gigi there at the bottom, Pretty Lies and Alibis. You know her from her podcast. You also know her from News Nation, Law and Crime, and probably so many other media outlets. Gigi has also teamed up with us in the past to cover Charlie Adelson and Donna Adelson in all of those tapes, but she's also an expert in this case. I know that Lauren and Gigi worked together, or at least worked side by side, covering the Lori Vallow case. So I just want to say thank you to both of you guys for being here. And thank you to everyone from all 3 of the channels for coming. I know a lot of you guys are excited for all of us to discuss what's going on. But I just want to get started off the top here. Lauren, you've been there. You've obviously been in the courtroom, been speaking to everyone who's been there. And yesterday, there were some huge developments. And I know for a solid hour or 2, all of us were just holding our breath, trying to figure out what was going to happen. Explain what the update is, what happened, and sort of what was going on in the courtroom as we found out that there was an issue with the charging documents.
Yeah, it was truly a wild and holding your breath day yesterday in the courtroom. I couldn't believe it. We had all prepared to go home early. We all sensed that the prosecution was going to rest. Even Judge Boyce said that as much. The day before, he's like, "We're probably gonna have a short court day." I think that it was almost like we just knew we needed to get through one witness, and then the prosecution would rest, and we're going home and starting Monday with the defense. Well, that changed drastically. We took our morning break. We took we took a break right before lunch, thinking that was our lunch break. There wasn't going to be a lunch. We were all going home before lunch. We go back in, the prosecution rests. We're all on a high because it was such a great witness. Agent Hart did an incredible job. We were just like, this is a done deal. We're going to see justice. We all file back in, and this is sort of protocol too. But they're going through all of the evidence that's been laid out by the prosecution. And John Pryor, the defense attorney for Chad Daybell, is saying, "Look, Judge, let I don't think they met their burden. Let's seek an acquittal or whatever." And going through all the evidence, making sure that we hit all of our points. And then Judge Boyce, it was actually Judge Boyce. He says, "Well, we've got a problem. The indictment was amended in February, everyone, and J.J. Vallow, it says here that he died on or about September 8th, 2019. And J.J. Vallow, sweet 7-year-old J.J. Vallow, who we're all, just like fighting for justice for and have been for 5 years. His grandparents are in the courtroom. They say, well, he was alive at that time. He in fact, the jury has been shown evidence that actually he was alive and well until at least September 22nd. And you can see the prosecution has their hands over their mouths, like this death date's completely wrong. And Judge Boyce says, and the evidence that the jury has seen, they've been handed this indictment, they've seen this, the evidence doesn't match up. And we're just like, oh my gosh. And then Judge Boyce says, and in rule whatever, I don't remember the rule number.
Rule 29 something, yeah.
Yeah, Rule 29. You have to, if you need to change this indictment, you've got to do it before the prosecution rests. The prosecution had rested like 5 minutes ago. We're like, you've got to be kidding me. You could hear a pin drop. We were like, what in the world? We all huddled out of that courtroom, like behind the scenes, just what was going on. we all just like slowly walked out of that courtroom in a daze, all looking at each other, strangers and friends, in the courtroom, people that are sitting by each other that don't know each other, people that have been friends and sitting by each other, all looking at each other going, what does that mean? Are we not going to see justice for JJ? Is this over? Like, is this it after 5 years? Larry was beside himself. Like I said, there was just like a mass huddle. Nobody knew what to do. And then we realized Larry was missing. We ran downstairs to the front because we're on the 4th floor. So we ran all the way down to the lobby and out the doors. And Larry's giving an interview off the cuff. He's dazed and confused too. I flip on my phone. I stand by Larry Woodcock's, a good friend of mine. He finishes the interview. We go and we sit down on a bench. We just sit there. And I have my phone out for my lunch live that I've been doing. I've been doing lunch lives every day. And I'm like, I'm explaining what just happened. And I'm looking at Larry and he's just, like I said, he's just blank. And what else was interesting that nobody could see is, like I said, nobody, usually for lunch, and Gigi knows this from last year, we all disperse. Everyone just kind of does their thing. We're all working or eating or whatever. Nobody did that yesterday. As I sat next to Larry and talked, there was like a huddle of people around us, like just swarming us, just like, because they didn't know what to do either. Like, it was such a the most heavy, horrible feeling. Like, it was just, we were all just standing there. And so what did we do? I guess the Utah girl came out of me. I turned off my phone and we all just sat there standing there. And I was like, you know what? Let's order a bunch of food. Let's go back up to the 4th floor. We've got another hour. So, I ordered everyone that was there, just like a bunch of food. We just sat there and talked and cried. Kay came running. It was just Larry in the courtroom. Kay came running, like, what is going on? She gave Larry a huge hug. They just hugged each other. It was the longest, most torturous 2 hours that nobody expected at all. So that was behind the scenes.
I did ask you about this, but I hope it's okay. I pulled up some of the sound from Larry that you had because I was watching your lunch live. And Gigi, I want to get your reaction to this, but I'm going to pull this up because it was obviously so powerful. It was so stressful. I know our chat was talking about, what's going to happen now. We were all so worried. And then with your lunch live, I mean, you literally were there reacting with Larry. So let me pull this for everyone. Let's watch it for a minute or so, and then I'll have Gigi hop in here and give us her take. Give me 1 minute.
In my mind, it was just like, okay, JJ's irrelevant. And that just hurt. That hurt. It just hurt.
You've been here every day of the trial. Larry has been here every day of this trial for justice for your grandson. And to think that this count, I don't know what it means either. I don't want to jump to it either. I wish I had an attorney here too. But to hear that this count, thank you, Laura, this count of first-degree murder for JJ Vallow. Have you heard anything? Not yet. We have attorneys on speed dial right now, guys. We're reaching out. And there's a crowd around here, just so you guys know, like, everyone very concerned right now. I had a full lunch life plan, guys, and I was going to talk about.
I'll stop it right there. I know that you spoke to Larry, obviously, much longer than that, but I'll remove it right there. Gigi, why don't you hop in here and give us your reaction, because you obviously know this case very well. You also know Larry. And I'm sure you were also pretty shocked and taken aback as all of this was happening.
Yeah. And I don't know if you can see it, but I did put a picture down here at the bottom. I took a screenshot of the prosecution when they realized what was up. It's, it's hard to kind of get a clear shot, but you see Lindsay Blake. This is when she pulled up clearly that indictment and read and saw that it was wrong. And you just look at Rocky, and I think that picture speaks 1,000 words. I had to rewind it because it just didn't register at first that, because then, they've rested. Holy moly. Like, Pryor is going to get him off this charge on a technicality. Really happened last year. That's how Lori didn't get the death penalty. So it's, my chat, we were all just sick to our stomach. I said, I would hate to see a blood pressure reading on me for those 2 hours yesterday. It was sickening and terrible. And some people were saying, oh, he's still going to go away forever. But it's the point that even if you have the conspiracy charge there, it is the murder charge of that 7-year-old innocent child found in his backyard. You don't want that to go away just for obvious reasons. And just the thought for 2 hours that might go away. My heart was breaking for Kay and Larry. I reached out to Kay in the midst of this, and just devastation and shock, and just, a gut punch. Like she said, it's just a gut punch because that's their baby. And man, but thank goodness. I mean, Judge Boyce, I have to say, I said last year, Lori's trial might have been the smoothest trial I've ever sat in. He's a great judge. I think he's fair to both sides. And I think that, he really dug deep. And I think the arguments that the state put forth made a lot of sense. So that's the benefit of having such a smart prosecution team, is they're able to put their heads together over a couple of hours and make 3 really solid arguments, which ultimately ended in JJ's charge sticking. But Chad, like, his ears went up. I really went back and watched his reaction several times. And John Pryor cannot say he caught it. So it was Judge Boyce, but still Chad perked up really quickly. And I thought to myself, he's going to think this is part of the divine plan, the blueprint, that he's going to think this conversation with Lori, oh, things are going to work out. I'm like, don't give him that. Don't give him that, please. So thank goodness it ended well and that charge sticks and we move forward with justice. But man, those 2 hours, I don't drink. I about started day drinking yesterday.
Well, and Gigi and Lauren, I mean, the prosecutor's reaction says it all. Thanks for screenshotting that and sharing that.
But yeah.
I mean, that reaction, you don't get that very often in a courtroom. But Annie K here has a very interesting question, and it's something that we all were asking. Annie K says, can the panel explain why the judge waited until the state had closed before bringing this up? Because the whole issue was, now that the state had closed, according to law, you're not supposed to make any changes. But if he had said anything 20 minutes before, it still could have been amended easily. So do we know why he waited? Do we know if maybe he didn't notice before?
I honestly don't know if he did notice before. I think, and you know what's so funny? It wasn't even John Pryor, the defense attorney, that brought it up. You'd think that would have been his magic weapon. He claims he knew. He didn't know. It would have been the first thing he would have said. No. He had the biggest smirk on his face. Yeah, he would have brought it up. He
would have jumped up as soon as they said the state rests. He would have popped up like a jack in the box. Excuse me.
Yeah. I really think it was Judge Boyce looking over everything, as just this protocol, just what you do. And he was like, we've got a problem. We've got a problem. And so, I mean, Judge Boyce luckily did find it. Think if he didn't.
That was what I was going to say, Lauren, is thank goodness he found it yesterday and not, even after this case is over, because that would be a big issue potentially for appeal. I would assume.
Yeah. Yeah.
So thank goodness he did catch it. So.
Yeah. And I really think he set precedent too. The judge did, he kind of went in there. He's like, look, this is clearly an error. What I think happened, Gigi, you tell me. I think someone probably copied and pasted Tylee's charge, put it down, and then just forgot to change the date, because it is the date Tylee, was murdered. And, so I think that the judge really set precedent with a really solid argument, and he laid it out. I think Judge Boyce is such a good judge. I felt pretty good. I don't know how other people feel. I know other people feel otherwise. I felt pretty good about his argument and his decision that, look, this was a typo, and they never okayed an amendment. It was it was good for 4 years. It was solid for 4 years. It was just in February where they made an amendment for something else. They amended the indictment for something else that it accidentally got changed. So I think he kind of explaining. Go ahead.
What, Lauren and Gigi, I don't know any of this, so you might know since you guys are the experts. Astra's asking, how could they have not learned their lesson from having to change Lori's at the last minute of trial? Was this an issue with Lori as well? Or was there some kind of last minute change that they had to make?
Go ahead, Lauren.
There was some wording change that they had to make, on or about, things like it said on or about rather than on or in between, types of wording like that. And I don't know why they didn't switch it for Lori and for Chad, maybe that's not a question for me, but the wording changes that they had to make were really like technical. And I do think it was because it was a capital punishment charge that they had to be very specific. And again, Idaho just doesn't see these type of crimes. I think this is the first time prosecutors have been, writing an indictment this specific. So I think that they wrote the indictment and the judge was like, look, we got to get more. It was ruled that things have to just be changed to be really specific. I don't know though why we couldn't do that during Lori's trial versus Chad's, but I wonder if, the death penalty made a difference. Who knows?
Well, and all of our hearts stopped there for what seemed like a few hours as we were all sort of waiting to figure out what happened. It seems like now he is going to allow it for now, but it seems to not be a final thing. Like, could this be brought up again? Actually, I have a question here from Rosemary Romero saying, do you think that Chad could win an appeal for Judge Boyce overturning the motion for count 4 of JJ's first-degree murder charge? Is this a final decision, or I know that the judge was talking about having to discuss it again down the line?
I would say in law, everything's possible, right? Will John Pryor be filing appeals on this? Absolutely. Absolutely. Do I think he could win an appeal? I'm more optimistic. I don't. I'm not an attorney. I don't want to play one on YouTube. I feel pretty confident in, again, Judge Boyce's decision, but will there be attempts? Well, sure. Yes.
Yeah. And the thing too is I'm sure part of the 2 hours, Judge Boyce was checking with other people in the legal field to say, is this something that I can rule on if I go this route that's not going to bring this case back on appeal? So I'm sure he covered his bases too. And I think the big thing is John Pryor not starting his defense case kind of was a blessing in disguise, because, the state rested, but he had not started presenting his case. I think it might have been a little different had Pryor been already into his case. I don't know, but to me, it just seems like catching it before the defense takes over was a lucky catch by Judge Boyce. So yeah, but it's, you just sit here and it's, we know Kay and Larry and we've grown to love them like family. And so my heart hurt for them knowing I watched Lauren, talking with Larry. It's just so devastating. And you think last year, we had the drama of whether or not Larry would be in the courtroom and, or Kay, it was Larry, right? They weren't going to let Larry in the courtroom. And so it seems like both trials we've had these kind of heart-stopping moments of, holy moly, this is crazy, but everything ended well on both issues. But man, I don't want to go through that again.
Well, and the fact that it's not just, I mean, every homicide case is awful, but in this specific case, I mean, it involves children, it involves horrific details that we've been learning about. Like the
a 7-year-old boy with special needs,
Yeah, I mean, it's just so awful. And to have that technicality just stop us all in our tracks and think, wow, this could be an issue. There could be a charge that isn't, that he isn't facing because of a technicality, definitely just stops everyone and, is a huge concern. And obviously the law is the law, but I'm very grateful that the judge was reasonable and that things seem to be working out. But what about today? Have either of you, I know you guys both have a relationship with Larry, have either of you guys checked in on him or spoken to him last night, today, see how he's feeling after a very stressful day yesterday?
I know they were actually flying out of town for a graduation for their granddaughter. So that's what else, like, it was like the perfect timing, the prosecution was going to rest. They were feeling good. And then they were going to fly out to celebrate with family. So I do think that they're out of town now. Thank goodness this was resolved before Monday, because originally the prosecution was like, let's tackle this Monday. I can't imagine them being able to celebrate. So I haven't talked to them. They're celebrating with family. I hope they're doing okay.
Yeah, same. I didn't bother them last night because, just the decompression process of that stress. I thought they just need to be together. They need some quiet. So I'll check in with them on Sunday. So I'm just glad they're able, like you say, Lauren, to celebrate the graduation of their granddaughter, because that would have been such a heavy weight on their back all weekend. So thank goodness Judge Boyce was like, no, I'm going to give you 2 hours. And that's it. So Yeah, at least it got resolved before they left because they do deserve, you think about these last 2 years, the heaviness between Lori's trial going on really a year later at the same time as Chad's. It's just a constant reminder of what happened to JJ and then in a way Charles, even though he's not, part of the charges in this case, he's very much a part of this story. Kay and Larry lost 2 people in this tragedy. So just any kind of hiccup is just like, geez, we've waited so many years for this to go to trial. And then you would hate to see something like that just totally derail the justice process for JJ. So, oof.
And I'll say this too, in talking to Larry and Kay this week, actually specifically Larry, but Kay was kind of taking a break, as was Tammy Daybell's aunt. This trial has been really heavy and it's lasted a lot longer than Lori's, even in prosecution. And so this is from Larry. Larry said, we thought that after getting through Lori's, that would be the hardest and that this was going to be okay, and he's like, but the prosecution has done an excellent job. He was complimenting them, but they have been a lot more technical and a lot more specific and a lot more detailed. And he said, it's been a lot harder for us than I had imagined or expected it to be. He had thought the worst was over. And it was just this week he was telling me this as Kay was sort of taking a break from the courtroom. He was saying, we're ready for this to be over. This is really hard. This is really heavy. And then boom, that happened. So thank goodness this is resolved. But yeah, it was a very, very hard week for them in general. So to just have that, thank heavens it's been resolved before they've left. They really needed this break.
And you're mentioning that this case has been so much more, or this trial rather has been so much more detailed, or the evidence has just been much more descriptive, or I don't know, it just hit differently for the family. Have they decided to step out on certain days? Are there anything that they're doing differently to try to cope? Because obviously, even for us who are watching it at home, and for full disclosure, I'm fairly new to this case. I know you guys have been following this for quite some time, but I'm a mom of 3, and to hear what they're discussing, to imagine the reality of what happened, it is very difficult. So how is the family coping and dealing?
There are 3 family members that are in there the majority of days. It's Vicky Hoban, who is Tammy Daybell's aunt, and then Kay and Larry Woodcock, the grandparents of JJ Vallow, and they also do such a good job, supporting Tylee Ryan as well, JJ's sister. And last year, and Gigi knows this, last year Larry really only took I don't think he took a single day off, even the worst days, even when they were showing those pictures to the gallery that Gigi and I will never forget. Larry stayed. He wept in the courtroom audibly, but he was there. This time around, for the first time ever, Larry took a day off. So they let them know whenever it's going to be a hard day, whenever there's going to be evidence that they need to let the victims know about. And Larry, for the most part, has stuck it through until one day. And I think it was the first day ever in all of both trials. He was like, you know what? I got to be done for a second. Kay and Vicky have also taken some days off when they learn that it's going to be some very difficult details like autopsy photos or just descriptions they don't want to hear. They're taking care of themselves. And Vicky, will come sometimes at break and say, they told me that this morning about Tammy. I didn't want to hear it, but I'm here now. They are all so committed, and they want to be there, but it's getting heavier and heavier. They took I think they took a few days off this week. It's getting hard.
And Gigi, I know that I don't know. Are you planning on still going out there?
Yeah, I'm leaving early Sunday morning, like way early.
Okay.
I'm excited to see you.
I know. I can't wait to see you.
I know. I wish it was under other circumstances, but I'm so looking forward to seeing you.
For sure. Me too. I can't wait to get up. It's been weird watching it at home, but just with mom stuff going on, one running track, one getting ready for graduation, it just didn't work out for me. And, to be honest, a lot of the networks really didn't think the interest would be high in this case. So last year, there was a lot more media there pretty much on a consistent level. But this year, and for me, I have to say, I agree that we've learned a lot more in this trial, I think, than we did in Lori's, because when they released the Chandler document dump and the Gilbert document dump, we got a really good picture of some of the inner workings of what led up to these murders. But and I think a lot of Lori's trial was sort of things we knew. We did have some things in there we didn't, but with Chad's, the dash cam video of him after he got arrested talking to Emma was just blew my mind. And then that phone conversation they just played a couple of days ago. I mean, so we're hearing a lot more details. And then for me, that jail call really turned my way of thinking a bit about Lori and Chad. You know, they really did a good job on this trial of showing Chad as the mastermind, as the one who really was pulling the strings as far as the thought process. I think they're 50-50 culpable. They both traded off their power at certain times. But I've just learned so much about these little details that really fill in a lot of those missing puzzle pieces, along with re-binging a lot of Lauren's interviews with Suzanne Freeman, Heather Daybell. Kind of rewatching those during this trial has given me a lot better insight into just the whole picture. So if you guys haven't watched those interviews on her channel, do, because it really kind of filled in a lot of gaps for me too, that helps me understand this stuff a lot better. Like Chad doing this way before he met Lori. This is nothing new with Chad.
Right.
I mean, it's just he finally found his band of misfits that were like, yeah, we'll follow you. You know, and so
Right.
we finally found his group,
Exactly.
and man, he went full speed after he found his people. It's insane.
Well, and
So
Gigi,
well said. Yeah.
Lauren and Gigi, the last time we spoke, I remember I asked you guys, I said, who was leading who in this? And that was sort of the debate that we had last time that we had a live. And I know a lot of people say, you know, Lori has always had her patterns and Chad has had his patterns. But what I found interesting in some of the text, I actually wrote it down, so I'm going to read it. Sorry, I probably should have built a graphic here. But there were some texts from Lori to Chad. And the text says, let me see. Okay, Lori Vallow is asking Chad Daybell if there is, quote, a perfectly orchestrated plan to take the children. Please ask the Lord to take them. And Chad responds saying, there is a plan. So I do think in this trial, as you were just mentioning, Gigi, they are very much trying to lay down all of the evidence and give us a clear path that Chad is holding Lori's hand and is showing her the way. And his way obviously is a very sick and twisted path to obviously what we now know. And so previously when I spoke to you guys, I had asked how you guys felt about who is leading who. Does one have more guilt over the other? Where are you guys now in terms of how you're feeling about Chad versus Lori, or are they just equally both pretty evil at this point?
Good, Lauren.
Okay. I was like, go
Or
ahead.
as-
I had a dog
Wait,
nibbling on my toe.
I'm like, really,
I-
really quickly. Also, everyone, please submit your questions, but put cues in there. I'm going to start to pop them up. All right, continue. Sorry, Lauren.
Yeah, no, I've actually always I have fluctuated in other areas of this case, like up and down, like thinking about things, but this is actually one place where my husband, Dr. John Matthias, and I have always stayed pretty consistent. Our first podcast in June of 2020, we sat down with microphones in our living room. We hadn't had the FOIA docs or anything, and I was like, "Hey, John, tell me about Lori Vallow." And he said, "Before we talk about Lori Vallow, we need to talk about Chad Daybell, because Chad Daybell is what puts this whole thing in motion." So I know that rubs people the wrong way when I say that. They're like, "You're not holding Lori accountable." Lori is exactly where she needs to be for the rest of her life, and she allowed this to happen. You heard Co's text that she just read there. Lori is responsible and she's been held accountable. But I think we all look at Lori because she's the mother and she let this happen to her children. But when it comes to like the belief system, and this is what I've always said, whose belief system is this? Who was learning the belief system? It was Chad Daybell's belief system that he was teaching Lori and encouraging her. And I can't not. I will never stop saying that, no matter what a horrible mother we find out Lori was in her life or all the problems she has had. This sex, power, and money was created through a belief system, and this belief system is Chad Daybell's.
Yeah, I agree. And I think too, a lot of people say, and the one thing I think is what's important is April Raymond made a comment that Lori felt Charles wasn't her equal spiritually. So I think that Lori was listening to these Julie Rowe podcasts, reading Chad's books, and starting to get radicalized. And then when she met Chad and he's like, we've been married in other probations, that was it. That was what she was looking for. So it's just like fire and gasoline, and they just met. And I think that they took turns being in control and being manipulative. For example, when Tammy wasn't dead yet, Lori's like, just go be with your family. We don't have anything until essentially she's gone. That's manipulation on her part to get Chad to speed up killing his wife so they could be together. And so I think we do see that switch off at times. The one thing I will say is that Lori, in hindsight, was never a great mom. You look at the custody battle with Joe Ryan as an example, and what Tylee was put through in what I think was Lori's quest just to get free of Joe Ryan. But there's something to be said for the fact that she never killed her kids until Chad Daybell came along. Now, do I think that makes her any less culpable? No. A mother's job, your core job as a mom, is to protect your little baby, even if they're 50. They're your baby. You're going to take care of them. And she didn't. And she encouraged this. What's JJ at now? What number is Tylee at? Not a 0. That was a big thing. Like disappointment. The kids were not at the stage where, according to Chad's chart, they would be dead. So I think it's very 50-50. And at times Chad threw his power around and Lori gobbled it up, and vice versa. She threw her dance videos and her bikinis around, and it just, you see what happened here. Caused a big storm, y'all.
Yes, it did.
Gosh. Lauren, when that came out,
A little itty
that
bitty
day,
though. I
like,
wouldn't
I'm
call
gonna
it a
get
big
kicked
storm.
out.
Can I just
When-
say I
when
wouldn't
that
call it
came
a
out-
big storm.
When that came out
Itty-bitty.
that day, Lauren, I had to bite my tongue till it bled. I was like, I have the sense of humor of a 12-year-old boy. So when that poor agent on the stand, what is the storm? Chad's penis. I was like, don't laugh. Don't laugh. The judge is going to kick you out. And every time I hear it, I just giggle and then Chad looks so proud. Did you see that? Where he
That's
looks
what's
at
so
the jury?
disgusting. Yes.
Oh,
he's proud. He's
like,
proud of this. He's
did you
proud
guys
of
hear?
his. Yeah. I mean, he's proud of his, like, how not to sext text, right?
my
Like, they're
gosh.
so terrible. They're so
It's so
terrible. And he is proud in it, which is also despicable. Most human beings would be mortified that these are being read to the world. And he does seem proud, which makes it all the more despicable.
Look, when
And
that
the irony is he's also always just sitting there lifeless.
yeah.
And then
Yeah,
it's like
slug.
the one time he's reacting, it's to that. So
Yeah, I always think
Yeah.
my computer's frozen when he's on the screen because he's just like, so stiff. But I mean, if that were me, I'd have my head down. I'd fake a seizure to get out of that testimony. If they're reading my smut texts, all across the world, I would be in my chair, like, pretending like I had a seizure, get carted out, let it go on. There's no way, y'all. No way. I'd stand up and say, I'm an idiot. Just send me to prison for the rest of my life just for these texts. That's bad enough.
Yeah, no, Chad's like, keep going, please. Please.
He's reliving it in his mind. Ooh.
Oh, it's terrible.
all right, question
too.
from Rosemary Romero here. For full disclosure, she keeps asking a lot of questions. Thank you, Rosemary. But if anyone else wants to chime in, I have like 25 here pulled up, but please put 2 or 3 cues so that I can see them. This is for both of you ladies. What did Gigi and Lauren think of the jailhouse call between Lori and Chad on June 8th?
I thought it showed their dynamic really well, like the push and pull that Gigi talked about, the back and forth, but like just how it showed. They saved it for Chad's trial because it showed how Chad was calling the shots and manipulating Lori. I mean, they didn't play this in Lori's trial, I think, for a reason. And it shows, they're talking in code. They're trying to put a house down on, or a mobile home or a manufactured home down on the children's graves. They both seem to know. But Chad's the one, he had filed a permit. Then Lori's talking in code. He's reading Visions of Glory to her at the beginning, this strange book that they considered was scripture. They're talking about the New Jerusalem, the second coming. And in the end, I love it. Like, Chad's trying to blame Alex on everything. He's like, the contractor, Alex, he's texting dead people. We've heard of seeing dead people. Chad texts them. So he's texting Alex, who's dead, who's like the contractor and the blueprint of all of this. And then Lori's like, well, is this plan going to work? Is this plan going to work? And Chad's like, Alex says it is. She's like, no, I need to hear from you that it's going to work. And that's when he was like, I have never been more confident. I am so assured this plan is going forth. I'm telling you, I'm in charge. You're beautiful. You're a goddess. I thought that for me, that was like the moment. He's like, trust me, this is happening. Taking the reins. It was a powerful moment. But I actually haven't talked to Gigi about it, and I'm really curious what you took from it, Gigi. I was just sitting there. We can't even talk to our neighbors about it. We're just taking it in.
Yeah, no, I know. I'd have been sending you hand signals or something. But I mean, it was so revealing, and you really see the depths of what they believe. And I think with Lori, for me, I've always thought Lori was a lot more, and definitely Alex, more invested in this wackadoodle belief system. I think Chad liked the power. I don't know that Chad necessarily bought into everything he was selling, but I think Lori and Chad just gobbled it up. It showed me that with the giggling, and you had these little code words about the soil, and you can't, something about digging in the backyard or something like that. You know what I mean? She said that 2 or 3 times. You know what I mean? And you know what they're talking about.
Yes.
In some roundabout way, they're talking about what's on Chad's property. Little did they know the planning that was going on the very moment they had this call. It was the day before they found JJ and Tylee. But it was horrific. Really, to be honest, they're giggling like my 12-year-old does on the phone with her friends. And there's 2 kids dead, and in some ways almost throwing it in the face of everybody who heard that in that courtroom and across the world, that they know what's up, but we don't. And it's one of those things, I'll listen to it 10 times and have a different opinion every single time. But I do think it's just another indication of no remorse, still believing what they did was right. And man, between that and the dash cam video, those were the 2, to me, the biggest pieces of evidence the state put in this trial that shows the jury, Chad never said, what'd you find on my property? Like, where? Whose
Right.
remains did you find? All that, I think it's gonna be very powerful to this jury.
I
And
agree. I
I
agree.
just wanted to pop up these photos quickly. I know that many of you guys here that are watching have been watching this for a very long time, but I just wanted to pop up the photos of JJ, of Tylee, and of Tammy Daybell there. These are obviously the 3 victims that we're talking about. And through all of these cases, it's very sad, obviously, to have to see any kind of trial that involves children. But here it was not just 1 child, but 2 children, and also Tammy as well. So I do want to take a minute to remember them, and also all of their family, who obviously is still grieving and will forever grieve. We always talk about closure, but I was just speaking to someone yesterday who lost a young daughter, and she was telling me that closure is, it never happens. It makes us feel good to say that, but this is a lifelong thing that they're always going to have to deal with. And the facts and evidence, as we are hearing, are very, very difficult. So our hearts are with all of the family members. And speaking of family members, Gigi and Lauren, this is a question here from Astra. We know how the victim's family members feel, but what about Chad's family? What about his kids? Do we know who is testifying, if anyone? And do we know how they feel about what's going on? I don't know how much we've heard from them.
Yeah, so I suspect, and I'll go first. Is that okay, Gigi? I just jumped
Yeah,
in.
no, I want you to go first.
Okay.
You're there.
Okay. I suspect these are the 2 I'm most interested in. Emma Daybell, I think, will certainly be one. In fact, I suspect that she'll be the star witness of John Pryor, which is another reason this dash cam footage of Chad is so important, because he was talking to Emma, and it didn't paint Emma in the best light either necessarily. She was like, there's dead people on our property, and they're like, well, anyway, let's talk finances. So Emma for sure, because Emma seems to be the strongest believer and spokesperson for her dad. She was the most involved in this belief system that I've brought up. A lot of the people that I interviewed that Gigi brought up, they knew Emma. They didn't know the other kids, but they knew Emma. Emma voiced Julie Rowe's books. She was close to Eric Smith. She talked to Julie Rowe the day her mother died. She was very involved. And then went on 48 Hours when the kids made their one and only interview. She was sort of the spokesperson on that interview, leading the way. So Emma is going to stand by her dad, and it'll be really, really interesting. And I think I might have some like secondhand discomfort also listening. And I do hope, and I'll answer the rest of your question, Koa. I do hope that the prosecution doesn't treat her with kids' gloves, because she is a victim. She lost her mother, but she's testifying for the defense. And so I hope that they don't treat her with kid gloves, because she is a victim, or, and a survivor and all this. And then the another one I'm interested in, excuse my cough, I call it the courtroom cough. We're all still getting over it. Another one, a sweet hidden gem, gave me some eucalyptus shower balls that I'll use in the shower later today. But another one I'm interested in is Garth Daybell. Garth is the oldest of the Daybell children. He loved his mother. I've only heard the most wonderful, sweetest things about Garth, but we hear Garth on the 911 call the morning that Tammy Daybell dies. And it's because he says on that 911 call, "My dad and I have found my mother on the ground, frozen." And then he says, I don't know. And Chad takes the phone. And in other words, he was there and allegedly helped Chad move her body, because of this claim that she fell out of bed. And so there have been a few different stories. And so what Garth could bring to the table, even, and if it's for the defense, I'm concerned what he might say, or if his story is going to change. But he was there, and he's a witness to this morning of finding his mother. And how that works in the defense's benefit, I don't know. But those are the two I'm most interested about. The one that will not testify, I don't think, is Mark, the youngest. He was actually living in South Africa on a Mormon mission at the time of his mother's death and all of this. So I doubt that they'll request Mark, unless there's something I don't know. You never know in this case. But Gigi, thoughts?
Yeah, I think Emma is going to be the biggest, and I really hope it's next week while I'm there, just to be a little selfish. And Lauren, I've heard the same thing about Garth. He sounded so stunned on that 911 call, understandably. I mean, he lived at home. I think here's the thing though. For me, I think the wait for the jury is going to be people who saw Tammy every single day and talked to her every single day and said, look, she said she felt fine. I think at this point, that jury can reasonably conclude Chad probably raised his kids on these beliefs. And maybe if their mom was dark, they're okay with her being gone. It's part of their thought process. It's part of what they've been raised on. And you can't fault kids for not being able to quickly break that cycle of everything you've been told. So it's going to be interesting. The thing I never heard Leah mentioned, though, when they read out the people that were involved in that family chat where they're talking about the kids in Sunday school, she was the one that was left out of that. And I've heard maybe Leah is not as supportive of her dad as she was. It's just secondhand. And I'm just putting it out there. But I think that the rest, they're going to stand by their dad. I just hope they don't get up there and perjure themselves, to be honest, because I think that's going to be a big risk.
That's what I'm worried about, especially for Garth. If Chad has told Garth to say something, there's a part of me, I actually think it's chilling, that moment where Garth calls. Here's a theory, Lauren's theory. And Gigi, you can agree or disagree, because this is my theory, my speculation. Because there's multiple stories about Tammy's death, and her falling out of the bed, and Chad and Garth moving her to the bed is just strange in general. If you were trying to plan a scene to cover something up, it's not in your best interest to have the person fall out of the bed and then put her back in bed. I don't think it's a story he wanted. And so what I think happened is Garth maybe affected the plan. I think that Chad's plan was the plan he wrote on the Avow website. He wrote on the Avow website that he woke up and found his wife smiling peacefully in bed next to him. I think that Chad was probably in a different bedroom that night. because I don't think he would lay by his dead wife for hours. And I think that maybe something was messed up and he came and he found her on the ground, was like, I've got to pick her up and put her back in bed. So it looks like she's in bed. Garth also came in, and maybe Garth came in first. Maybe Chad came in first. I don't know. Garth says they found her together. It was they. We found my mother. So there was no Chad Daybell waking up in bed with her. They move her to the bed. Why do you move a body? Because you don't want to have the like whole falling out of bed story. They're moving her body because they want her to be found in bed. You know, if they were going to start with the like her falling out of the bed, like they don't need to move her body. So then I think that Chad probably coached Garth a little bit, called 911. And then when the first thing Garth said is, we found her on the ground frozen. I think Chad was like, stop.
Mhm.
And when he was like, I don't know, Chad took the phone. I don't think he ever wanted the falling out of bed story to be part of this. And because Garth said that on the 911 call, he had to go with it. And my point is, I think he's been trying to control Garth's story in this for a very, very long time, telling Garth what to say and what not to say. And that's why I'm telling you this theory. And I agree. I hope they don't perjure themselves, because I think that Garth was like starting to tell the truth and
Mhm.
Chad was like, stop. And
Yep.
I think there are a few different stories. And so let's hope. I agree with you. I'm worried.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%, because the way that 911 call abruptly stopped with Garth, and it's like, yeah, this is her husband or whatever. You could tell probably Chad's in the background going, and then just give me the phone, let me handle it. No, that's been my theory as well. And I know that there was a YouTuber that caught Garth outside. And he did speak to Garth, and Garth was very gracious. Normally, the other kids will stare at you if you're at the property. They're not very nice. But Garth really did seem like a genuine young man. And unfortunately, his dad's put him in a very bad situation. On top of losing his
Yes.
mother, is he now part of a cover up? And then you have to think internally, what is that doing to him? It's just so sad what these kids have endured. I do have sympathy for all of them, because they were raised in a way none of us could imagine. And it's like being in a cult. You don't break that quickly. And especially if it's your parent doing it. At the same time, after Lori's trial, I thought if anything was going to change their minds about their dad's culpability, Lori's trial would have been it. Doesn't seem to have happened. So sometimes it's so embedded in your DNA, what you've been taught. I was raised as a Baptist. I'm not practicing now, but there's still times where I stop and I'm like, oh, hang on now. I learned when I was a kid, it's just etched in you. And so that's probably going to be the case with these kids for a long time, and guess unless they get some very intensive therapy,
Well, I
and
feel
get
like also the issue, Gigi, is as you just mentioned, this is someone's parent,
Yeah.
and this is all he has left, and it's not a good option. But when you're in that situation, when you were there, I mean, he probably feels a lot of culpability, even just him being there or not being there, like just all of the details. I mean, I feel like even as an adult now, I would be fearful of just thinking of being in a situation close to any of that, and to put yourself in that position. It's your father, it's your mother. All of the pieces just don't make sense. It like to emotionally absorb that and to try to make sense of it. It does not make sense for anyone, let alone to now have to be in a position where you're forced to defend someone, whether or not you want to or not. And now you're committed to it.
I'll tell you too, my daughter and I, and then I got my son in on it. We tried to recreate this rolling out of bed. So I wrapped my top sheet and my comforter around my feet pretty tightly. And I had my kids in the bed, taking those and rolling over, and it did nothing. I mean, like, I'm light as a feather, stiff as a board, right? I'm not moving. I'm pretending I can't move a muscle. And it literally wasn't until my son, who's 17 and muscular, got that sheet and pulled up hard that I barely rolled, but I didn't come close. And I was on the edge of the bed. We just did that just for not giggles. It's not a funny thing, but just to test the theory. And no, I mean, I didn't budge. So, that's one thing. It would have been nice if the prosecution somehow could have recreated that to show the jury. But I think the jury's not stupid. And to think, Lindsay Blake always reiterates, do dead bodies roll out of the bed? Not that I've seen. So I think the jury with their common sense can say this is bogus. But we did. It was harder. I mean, he literally had to use both hands and kind of pull it out from under me. And, it's but not a
Wow.
little tug of I'm turning on the other side. No way.
Well, also, there
I
are
know.
some differing stories about the falling out of bed. Heather Daybell says that Chad told her that her feet were out of bed because
Mhm.
her feet would be hot. And then he told someone else that her feet were tangled up in bed and she went head first. So I just want to say, even this falling out of bed story is just, in
Yeah.
other words, let's just go back to Lindsay Blake. She's got it. Dead people don't fall out of bed.
Yeah, his creativity of that alibi is about as good as his ability to find fake names like Boyd Dial and Chad Dayball. So we're not dealing with the sharpest tool in the shed here. Yeah, she rolled out of bed. Her feet were tangled up. It's
Yeah.
like killer menopause, killer book fairs is what Chad and Pryor want to attribute Tammy's death to. It's sickening, really. Feel so bad for her family and especially Samantha and Jason. It's been tough on them.
And Didi
Yeah.
Kata here writes this question, but a lot of people in the chat have been asking, do you guys think, or here, I'll read it. Do you really believe that Chad believes his own BS, or is he working a big con? At first I feel like some of us didn't really know, but now we've seen him, we know all the details. At this point, do you think he still really believes what he says he believes? Or is this just a con, or what's going on?
This is where I am now, because this is the question that I'm not so certain about, that I have gone back and forth over for 5 years. But I think I've come to the thing. I think the question for me now is, at what point does he stop believing and start making things up? Because I do believe that he believes and believed in the LDS church. I do believe that he believes, or at least once believed, a lot of the things maybe that got him into his radicalization. And maybe he was believing a lot of that while he was radicalized. But then there comes a point where, when you're trying to convince someone to move away from Rexburg, Melanie Pulowski, because you don't want her talking to the police, and she's like, no, but I thought this was the City of Lights. And you're like, well, it was the City of Lights, but now it's evil because the police officers are dark. I'm like, I don't think he's believing this.
Yeah.
So the question for me now is, at what point does his belief begin and end? What about you, Gigi? I'm really curious to know your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can tell yourself a lot of BS, and over time, if you consistently, and I also think Chad placed himself in this position of authority on his own. And so I think over time, my theory is that he started believing in his own lies. It happens all the time. You tell a lie enough, you are convinced of it. I just really do think, though, at the end of the day, he liked that power of being the one everybody came to for confirmation. They believed he could see on the other side of the veil, and it was Jason, his brother-in-law, on the stand said, at first this Flaming Gorge incident was a story he told. Then it was he saw dead relatives. Then it was he could see in heaven. And so you see over time that story evolved, I think, as Chad's plan or whatever he wanted to do kind of evolved. A lot of that, I know Suzanne Freeman said some of that came from her book, especially with how Jesus laughed and had a sense of humor. He's on that podcast saying that. I think he picked little pieces from everybody's near-death experiences, and even Julie Rowe, in a big way, and kind of just used the framework for that and then filled in his own details. And that made him like the wackadoodle, great and powerful Oz in his own world. And I think that when he met these group of people that were like, I mean, if dude told me we've been married in past lives, like, I'm going to run. Okay. I'm going to change my number. I'm not going to talk to you. But that was what Lori wanted. So the minute she gobbled that up, and then you got little Alex like a puppy dog following his sister, Chad's like, I got them. And to Chad, she's hot and she wants me. And I think that really was the gasoline on that already burning fire that just made it go boom.
What do you think of this, though? I agree with you. Right? Chad is like the question, but when it comes to Lori, I think I've never been more convinced that she really believed it all.
Oh, I think she does too. And
Do
look,
you
if
think
I
she
had,
still believes it? Do you
yeah,
think she's
Yes.
sitting there right now
I've heard as
saying,
Yes.
"Wow, I
much.
still believe everything"?
Yes.
Yeah, I've heard that.
Yes.
I've heard that from sources in the know, 100% still committed. And I think if you have any doubt, you go back to that allocution statement she made at her sentencing. It was so off the wall and borderline inappropriate. With Tammy Daybell, my good friend, visits me. Look, I think Vicky had her hands on Samantha's shoulders when she was saying that at one point, because if I was Sam, I would have like one-handed over the divider and I'd have caught a charge because I'd have pounded her down. But I think if you listen to that allocution statement, there's no doubt in my mind you can be culpable, but you can be mentally ill. And I think that's what Lori is. I think she is as much culpable as she is mentally ill. And people
Yeah,
don't
and
like to hear that. People want to make it just this evil, evil story. I think that was part of it because you don't lie to the police when they come looking for JJ. If you believe it, you say, yep, we killed them. They were zombies. Did the whole world a favor. Why did they not admit it? Because she knew it was a crime and she'd go to prison. So she has that aspect. She's a fascinating study in psychology, I think, for a very long time to come. But I do think she's
yeah.
mentally ill. And all I had to do was hear that allocution and say, no, out to lunch.
And I think her still believing it is part defense mechanism now too. I
Mhm.
mean, maybe they could have had an opportunity with her, but I think she's so far gone because to come out of reality and to realize she did this to her children, I think that's why I think
It's a
it's
good point.
partial probably defense mechanism too. I don't think
Very
there's
good
any
point.
getting her out of this belief system.
No. I just want to know if she's heard Chad's thrown her under the bus, essentially.
I mean,
That would be
she
nice.
I can
has to. She has to, right? Like,
Yeah, I'm
she
sure.
does not believe Chad's throwing her under the bus. I'll just say
Yeah,
that.
that's true. This is all part
But
of
I
the
mean,
plan, the blueprint.
what I'm saying is I know that she does
Oh,
not. Yes, she has heard as much. She does not
gotcha.
believe it.
Yeah. Well, that just goes to show you where she's at mentally. But I don't think I've ever seen a defendant so culpable, yet so not there. Um, I don't know. It's very bizarre to me. There's evil, there's a lot of things mixed in. But I think to deny mental illness is at play here with Lori. I mean, we all want to just say she's just an evil woman, but man, that allocution statement, that was my confirmation. There's something not right there. And I've heard from other people who have contacted her or interacted with her that know her that will say the same. This is not the Lori we knew. It's not an excuse, but it explains a lot. You look at Tylee, she had braces. JJ had always clean cut. The kids were taken care of, that kind of thing. You meet Chad, what, less than a year later, they're in the ground. What happened in that time frame? And I want to know, do you think, Lauren, that when Chad went to Arizona in, what was it, August? And clearly you would assume he met JJ and Tylee during that trip where he said Tylee didn't like him. I think that set this in motion. And I've also wondered, did Tylee just get bitter at some point and say, I'm going to the police about Charles? I've always wondered that.
Yeah, I don't know about the Charles police thing, but and as in I don't have an opinion. Like I don't know,
Yeah.
but I do think that she certainly showed Chad that she didn't like Melanie Gibb. I mean, she saw right through these people. She was like, "What the hell is this?" And I'm sure she didn't like Chad, and that would not make him happy. But just remember, though, it was 2 days after they met that he dubbed her Dark too. It
Right.
was
So
he meets Lori, and then he writes that email, and he's like, "Yeah, your daughter's dark." Um, yeah, no, I know. I think so. It's so heartbreaking, but that, yeah, she didn't like him, and she is not a girl that Chad would be okay. I mean, he was okay rating a lot of children dark. I think we've
yeah.
heard about 8 different kids that he's rated dark during this trial. So if a teenage girl wasn't liking him, that was not going to be okay with him.
And Tylee was a spitfire. She would let you know from everything I've heard about her. She would voice her opinion. And I'm sure she voiced her opinion about Chad, maybe to him and to her mom. And so that's an obstacle to their mission. And there you go. And that's why what, less than a month after he met her, probably in Arizona, she's dead.
Yeah. And let's remember when it comes to Lori's mental illness, or whatever's going on, the reason why it's no excuse is because it actually makes her a greater, I would say, risk to the community. That's one reason to keep her locked up forever and ever. Punishment, yes, and justice, yes. But remember, as far as risk factors go, I just want to point that out too. Like, that's actually why she needs to be in there for the rest of her life. I also just want to point out too, you never forget who threw who under the bus. Lori would never ever throw Chad under the bus.
Yep.
And Chad threw Lori under the bus the first day.
Yep.
I mean, you can't, there you go, right there.
And we're now, what is it, 6 weeks into the trial? So the state just rested. Now the defense is going to pick up on Monday. And Jenny Allison has a good question here. Do you think that there was someone the prosecution should have called to testify that didn't? Or is there someone that they did call to testify that surprised you? I added in
That's
that
a
last
really
part.
good question. That's a really good question because there are people I feel like they should have called and they didn't. And I'm actually going blank right now. So give me a second because there have been multiple people I've brought up and I thought they should have. I'm so glad they brought Heather Daybell in. That was
Yeah,
important.
she was so strong. Chad actually, he looked at her, but you could tell he was a little uncomfortable with her up there because he probably knows she don't play. He was also uncomfortable with Samantha up there. These are people that have known him. So it's easy, I think, to have an expert witness you've never met up there talking about your life. But when you get two women up there that have known you for decades and know who you are and have spent holidays and vacations, to have them up there with everything that's happened, to me, his body language was so different. Almost, when Kay was on the stand, he didn't even look at her hardly. He was like, when his mom was on the stand, posture up, good boy. It's been interesting to watch his body language through all this too. But yeah, with Heather Daybell especially, I noticed he seemed uncomfortable, as he should, because she's a spitfire and I love her. I don't know her, but I love her.
Yeah, she's great. She really set the whole history in motion. So I think it could have been good to have, and I maybe understand why they didn't call someone because it would be hard for someone to do this. But I think it would have been really good for perhaps some women to have come in that Chad Daybell had hit on in the past to show history and to say, yeah, he told me I was married to him in a past life too. Yes, he would call. I do know there was one specific woman in Arizona where a husband actually ended up having to call Chad and saying, leaving my wife alone. To have somebody like her on the stand saying, Chad has this history. Yeah, he tried to hit on me. He was creating a harem, a type of a thing, or at least hitting on me. And I also think maybe, Aunt Vicky, Tammy Daybell's aunt, is there, and she wasn't called. But I've wondered if her or her daughter Julie, or more people that were speculating that they believed that Chad could have killed Tammy, would have been good as well. Because it's a problem when your wife dies at 49, and a lot of people quickly assume that you did it. And I've been hearing those stories a lot outside of the courtroom, but not in the courtroom. So to have maybe some testimonies of people knowing, no, we just knew. So those are a couple thoughts.
And a follow-up to the testimony, the witness list here. So they obviously rested. We saw everyone that they brought forth. Do you think the witnesses, the testimony, the evidence was strong enough for a death penalty case?
I do. I feel like it's been like a story of the tortoise and the hare, that John Pryor came out like the hare just swinging, and the prosecution had a slow start, and I was freaking out. I think, I've been doing, like I said, these lunch lives every day, and they're like so real and so raw. And I think I even threw the prosecution under the bus like early on, like, do something. What is this? And now looking back at everything, I feel like it was the tortoise and the hare, that Pryor's actually calmed down a lot, gotten quieter, kind of leaned back, and the prosecution has just laid out their evidence very precisely, very, very thoroughly. I did talk to someone yesterday who went to court for the first time, and she said that she came because she was so stressed that she couldn't see the jury, and she was wondering how attentive the jury was. And I'm going to be curious your opinion, Gigi, next week.
Yeah, I
and
can't
she
wait.
She said that she felt calmer after seeing the jury, that she felt that the jury's listening and that the jury's going to take it in. And she's like, I just needed to know. I saw the jury. I think that they laid it out well enough for a death penalty case. And I think that that's why they laid it out so concisely and not over the top, even at the beginning or anything, because they just had to dot their I's, cross their T's, do it succinctly, take a long time. And I do think they did it. But thoughts, Gigi, as someone that's just been, that you've been watching it?
Yeah, and I the first couple of weeks I kind of felt the same way, but you're looking at 18 people who say and swear they know very little, next to nothing about this case, and it's so convoluted and there's so many elements at play between the religion and the number of people and their roles in the group, and how really the kickoff for this was the meeting, and then you had Lori very quickly wanting to divorce Charles. But, I remember last year, it took about a week to get that framework done. And then when they start filling in the pieces, I remember specifically watching the jury and their reaction when certain things were revealed, that Alex shot Charles. That was one thing. And I remember looking at the jury and you see these eyes get really big where it all starts to fit. So I think the first couple of weeks while we were all nervous, the prosecution knew we got to give them little bite sizes to introduce them to this really crazy world of Chad and Lori before we get into what their beliefs and their world did to innocent people. And so I felt like the last 2 weeks, like every day, knocking it out of the park. No doubt the story just really came into this big picture, and then they just started filling in these crazy pieces. So I'm interested to watch the jury. What is their reaction with Pryor? I haven't heard much about that.
I'm going to pull this up here from Holly. Holly wants to know.
Yeah, Holly.
I'm like, I feel bad because we have so many questions, all of you. I know people are asking if I'm pulling them up. I am. We just have, I think, close to 3,900 people watching. So it's impossible to pull up all the questions, but I see them and I'm trying my very best.
Wow.
But Lauren, this one's for you from Holly. How do the jurors respond when Pryor does cross? My face would give away exactly what I thought of his style if I was a juror. And even as they're listening to all of this testimony, I wish, we had a glimpse into what was going on, but obviously Gigi's going to be an insider and you're there right now, Lauren. So tell us, what have they been reacting to? What's it like sitting in there with them?
Okay. Yeah, I'll tell it. Yeah. And it's true. I remember texting Gigi during the Murdoch trial, the exact same question, because you were in there and I was like, what is the jury doing? So here's the jury. So I think it's a good group of jurors, variety of ages, almost half and half, male, female. There have been a lot of tears during hard things. So well, let me just say this. There was one juror, John Pryor does a lot of these self-deprecating jokes about his age or his brain or and there was one juror, for example, that would kind of smile at him, and it bugged me. You know what I mean? Like he'd laugh and joke, and she kind of like laughed back, and I was like, what's this? She has stopped doing that as much. In other words, I think that they're kind of done. So to go with your question further, it's changed through the process. And I think that's important to point out. It's not what it's always been like, but how it's changed. And I think they were really open to him at the beginning too. They were taking a lot more notes. During cross, I think that they were very, very confused. And now they are mostly taking notes only during the prosecution and fewer notes during cross. So that has changed. They were taking notes during cross yesterday, not all, but some. So, and yesterday was the day the prosecution rested and there was a lot of cross. So until the very end, some of them are still taking notes, but the notes have lessened during cross, but they haven't lessened during prosecution. That's something else. And I think the more that the jury has learned, the less pleased they are with Pryor, which is probably emotional, not having to do with John Pryor himself, but just emotional about the case.
And Lauren, someone had mentioned in the chat that, and for full disclosure, I haven't watched all of your lunch lives, but I do tune in often, that you were discussing that some of the jurors had teared up.
Yes.
Talk to us about that, because that's also interesting.
Yeah, I mean, so, Gigi and I saw the photos that the jurors are forced to look at. They're not showing the gallery this year, I understandably so, to protect, so the same thing, with Gannon doesn't happen. They're not showing so that it's not televised. But last year it wasn't televised, and Gigi and I saw the photos that the jury saw, and so I can tell you, as can Gigi, that what they're seeing is horrendous. And they're seeing the remains of children, autopsy photos, how they were found. They're hearing testimony of law enforcement uncovering the remains. Law enforcement witnesses are crying on the stand. So the first day, I think they kind of the prosecution just kind of threw the fuel on the fire the first week and showed them these photos the first week. Some of them, not all of them. And that day, there were like 4 jurors crying, including a man who kept wiping his eyes, like very teary eyed. They have been very affected. And then, as it's gone on, even recently, as far as it was last week, some more. There was really just heartbreaking testimony, and that there were tears just from the testimony alone. What possibly happened to Tylee also put jurors in tears. Um, they, yeah. And there was one juror who I hadn't seen cry at all, but, and I didn't see this. This is actually someone told me. I was out of the courtroom at this moment, so I'm telling you this from a witness who saw it. I've got my courtroom sources that this one juror that we hadn't necessarily seen cry, as they were explaining Tylee's remains and showing pictures of Tylee remains, this gentleman kept having to look at the ceiling, and while another juror just had to just stop looking at her screen, and every time he'd hear something, this gentleman just kept looking up.
Yeah, those pictures, I see them with my eyes open a year later, crystal clear. And so you're taking people out of the community who choose not to do this kind of work. They don't want to see this stuff. And then it's their civic duty to look at dead children. And, just for me, Lauren, and they were so bad. The one that haunts me the most to this day, I threw up the day. I used to work in a morgue, but I threw up the day they showed us the autopsy photos. The one with JJ with the duct tape from here to here, that one gets me because it's like they didn't want his identity. It's like they erased his identity doing that. And it was just so eerie and so horrific seeing what they did to JJ. With Tylee, it's your mind goes to what they had to do this. Like, wait, I'm always going to wonder where. I would assume the barn. But there's so many things I'm sure that's running through these juries' minds as they see these photos, and then the scratches on the neck where the duct tape was with JJ, that he's looking at people he knows and loves and he trusted as they're taking his life. And I'm sure all that is very much at the forefront of these juries' minds. And then you see the man right here, and then you see the video of him in the back of the car as they're unearthing these kids. And he's just, yeah, there's 16,000 in an envelope here, and just carefree. And then you hear this jail call, and then they're going to see these photos in their mind. The dude is toast. He's going down, never will be free again. He thought he was going to get off on JJ yesterday. Fat chance, boy. Pay the piper. I swear. You know what's going to be my problem, Lauren? Watching at home this year as opposed to being there, I'm going to have to stop saying, Pryor, you idiot. Like, I'm going to get kicked out of the courtroom. I'm so used to yelling at my computer screen. So I'm
yeah.
Don't talk. Don't say it out loud. Because at home, I'm like, what a moron. You have no class. So I'm going to have to sit on my hands in that courtroom.
They're a lot stricter this year too. A lot stricter. Like
really?
Last year we were able to kind of sometimes occasionally whisper, like no talking, no whispering at all. The place where you and I sat last year is completely roped off. They don't want anyone even near the jury. The courtroom's a lot smaller this year. Same courtroom, but they've roped off a good amount of the seats because they don't want anyone even remotely close to the jurors. And Yeah, and I get it too. It's a capital punishment case. Judge Boyce has made that very clear. This is no joke, and so it's a lot stricter this year. Yeah.
Yeah, and I got to go sit outside for the because last year with the ticket system, so I'm sitting here like, do I get there at 5:30? Do I get there at 6? Take my coffee, pull out my parka because apparently it's cold in the mornings there. We're
But have they
sweating here
turned
in South
anyone
Carolina.
away or no?
What's that?
Have they
Um,
turned anyone away in terms of the availability in media? Some people were asking if Lori had much more media and interest in terms of the trial coverage than Chad.
Lori had more media, but I think it was because it wasn't televised.
Yeah.
So if you were going to be covering it, you had to be in there to see it. Now that it's televised, this one's televised,
Mhm.
it's not as necessary. So I also think that there's always been in general an interest in the mother more than Chad.
Yeah.
That's why I'm grateful that the world is seeing this trial and because I've always said like uh don't not see Chad in this because this guy deserves his day in the sun, and he's getting it finally.
And from Molly M, thoughts on who may be rebuttal witnesses?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I don't know who they're gonna get. Any thoughts, Gigi? I think law enforcement.
I'm taking a phone call from my middle schooler. I'm gonna let you guys go at it for a
Okay,
couple
yeah, take a
seconds.
call. Well, I'll tell you one other idea I have. I think that if the Daybell children say something that's contradictory to what another family member that's not a child knows, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe they brought back a family to contradict the children because the children have not dealt with law enforcement. They haven't helped law enforcement, so I think that it might be to contradict a story they told to someone else. So if Garth or Emma shared a story with someone that is different than what they're saying on the stand, I think that would be a rebuttal witness that they would use.
And a lot of people in the chat keep asking about Emma. I've seen so many different chats here and now. Of course, I can't find one, but they're asking if you've noticed her resemblance to Lori.
People have asked that. I mean, maybe it's just me. I was asked that yesterday too. Because she's dyed her hair blonde. I mean, I think that's it. She's gone from brunette to blonde. To me, she still looks like Emma, but just a different hair color. Um, so that's what I see. Um, but that's it. But I see a hair color change.
So did Zulema. Everybody got a little glow up this year.
Yeah, they did. Yeah, Zulema's blonde. Yeah, right.
You have to
Um,
wonder, what does she still think? Like, is she in the clear? Does she miss Alex? Because she was, she's last year at Lori's trial, she seems still a little shook up about Alex to me.
Yeah, I don't know, yeah, I think she loved Alex. She said as much, I think, last year, right?
Mhm.
I don't know how she's doing or what she's thinking. She certainly is implying that she was manipulated by them and doesn't seem to believe in this now. I've always liked Zulema's testimony more than Melanie Gibb because
Mhm.
Zulema owns it a little bit more.
Yep.
Like she's a little bit more forthcoming, a little bit more like, yeah, I believe this. Or Melanie Gibb's like, well, no,
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know,
Yeah, when it gets
whatever, those
embarrassing, you
weirdos. Yeah.
yeah.
All right, guys, I'm going to take a few more questions and then we're going to wrap. I just want to remind everyone that if you guys like this show, if you guys like this kind of collaboration with a lot of different channels, please do us a very big favor. Subscribe to all 3 of our channels. It takes 2 minutes, but it shows support for all of us and it tells us that we should go and continue to do stories like this and live shows like this. You can also hit the like button on all 3 of our channels. It's the Surviving the Survivor Trials channel, it's Hidden True Crime, and it's Pretty Lies and Alibis. So please subscribe, hit the like button, share with your friends, share with your family members. And again, a quick reminder that Lauren and Gigi will both be back there covering this live from the courthouse. So they're going to have a lot of inside information. So please follow both of their channels for a lot of those details. And Gigi, I don't have the question here, but so many people were asking about it because you are the queen of getting prison calls. And some people said that they were surprised to hear the prison calls during the testimony. They wanted to know if you were surprised and if you were going to somehow be able to get a hold of those calls and do a show or a breakdown or analysis, whatever you want to call it.
I've heard there are thousands of these
Wow.
calls. And of course, I'm going to file to get them. I might have to sell a child to be able to. No, I'm teasing. Y'all might see me on the street corner working to get money to buy Lori Vallow's jail calls. But no, yeah, I've heard there are a ton. They talked over 10 times a day, apparently. I mean, very frequently talking. I'm not surprised to hear it. I think anything that was heard on these jail calls that's relevant to the case, that shows the manipulation, that shows the control, whether it's by Lori or Chad, you bring it in. It's just, it shows them in a very unguarded but unguarded way talking to each other. So I think it's just good insight into the dynamics of the relationship. I think it was super smart to bring that in, especially because you got 2 dead kids, 2 dead spouses, and they are giggling. Like, this is no big deal. You know, you've got Lori talking about, well, the plan, we were told 3% chance of trouble. It's 100%. What is trouble? Getting caught. So I think it was very revealing and did nothing but just reiterate to this jury, these people did not care about these human lives, these precious people. It was all about their mission. So no, good call by them. They probably could have brought in another 1,000.
And I just want to pull up this photo because this is Lori and Chad there. And if you guys all remember when they were in Hawaii, even as the world was stopped following the news, looking for the children, they were just enjoying themselves, having the time of their life. And so when I see this photo of them there, smiling, loving each other, you know, so happy in their euphoric moment, it's pretty disturbing to remember that during that time, I mean, everyone around them was having a very, very, very stressful time trying to figure out what was going on, where their kids were, what was happening. Did anyone know where they were? And here they are, just smiling, happy, calm.
Yeah, it blows your mind. I mean,
Blows my
you know,
mind.
you just have to wonder, did they ever think that like Kay and Larry would never want to see JJ, that Colby would never want to see his sister and his brother again? I mean, that's what I always go back to, is what did they just feel since these kids were on his property that they were good? Because really, you think about it, had they not took the shot at Brandon and had they just given JJ back to Kay and said, Tylee, go live with a friend, go live with your brother, they would have probably got away with Tammy and Charles's murder, because that
I
was deemed
know.
self-defense. Tammy was deemed natural. She was buried in the ground. It wasn't really until Brandon got shot at, and at the same time, you got Kay wanting to see her grandson. Had they given these
Right.
kids to other people, that have been still out there, probably living in a tent somewhere in Chad's property, you know,
I know
waiting
that
on the end times. So that to me, you know, killing the kids was, I think, and shooting at Brandon, clearly. But I think that shot at Brandon was really because he was on top of it. He was Googling, found Tammy Daybell's obituary. We just found out he Googled her, Chad Googled her obituary. I didn't know that. I don't think that was said last year, where he's looking
Mm-mm.
about the laws about digging, you know, exhuming a body. And then he looks for her obituary, which is interesting. Yeah, man, we've learned a lot of little nuggets. I had so many people say, not going to bother watching. It's going to be like version 2.0, the same thing. I disagree. This has been a completely different trial that has really made this more of a full picture than we've ever had.
Completely
And
agree.
this question is for you, Lauren. This is from Rabbit. It says, does Lauren think that when Chad said in the James and Elena story, she believes me, was that the bomb for the death penalty like it was for me? Was that the moment that you were taken aback?
Interesting. I think there's been a lot of moments. That was a good moment. That was a really good moment. But I think there are so many moments when Chad Daybell is saying, I'm getting rid of the children. Like you read the text earlier, when he was saying, like, trust me, there's a plan to, like, he didn't say get rid of, but whatever the text where the jailhouse phone call where he's like, there's a plan. Trust me, it's good. I think there are so many. I think the day of Tylee was a death penalty day. They explained in detail about Tylee's remains. They explained it a lot last year, but they explained it more this year. And I think that was a big moment for the prosecution because that would, I think, get the death penalty.
And Gigi, in
You
your
know?
mind, do you think there is reasonable doubt against moving forward with the death penalty? Like, do you have any concern? I know that in all the chats, as people are watching this trial, people see a lot of the guilt. They see the witness, they see the testimonies, they see all of the evidence. But the question now is, will he get the death penalty? I think. And for you, is there any kind of doubt?
I think that it's very possible after what this jury has seen, just the photos alone, and combine that with the fact that nobody on that jury is going to believe Alex Cox was sneaking kids onto his property and burying them. I hope the prosecution really points out in closings, Lauren, and you can back this up. When we were shown the photos of the progression of them finding JJ, and once they had removed him, that was dug pretty much to his specific size. There was very little extra room. I hope that they bring up, what did Chad do? He was a sexton. Alex was on that property 17 minutes when JJ was buried. That grave was dug. What blows my mind is after being at Chad's property and seeing how visible the pet cemetery and JJ's burial site is, to think they did this in broad daylight. There are neighbors' houses you can see from the road. It's not like they're out in the middle of nowhere. You look at all this. I mean, it blows my mind. But no, I think that the kids being on his property, that's just something that I think if they had not been on his property, we still would have a guilty verdict, because look at these text messages. Yeah, we have a plan for the kids in place. I don't think it's just they were found there. I think that is just your cherry on top.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to believe Alex made multiple trips to Chad's house. Also, the condition Tylee's remains were found in, that does not take a couple of hours. Takes a dedicated heat source when you're being cremated and there are still remains left over. So my question, and it's a very morbid one, how did this happen over time? Did they just keep going back and doing more and ultimately give up? Because I remember the green bucket last year. And it seems like at some point, they just were like, we got to stop. Like, this ain't working. And they just buried her. And they were so low, and they weren't deep in the ground. They were just barely underneath the surface. It's crazy, y'all.
Yeah.
It is crazy.
Yeah.
It is crazy. I mean, as far as death penalty, unless the jury somehow believes that the raccoon and Melanie Gibb colluded and started an LLC called the Seven Gatherers, I just can't imagine any other way 2 children are murdered and buried in his yard, and it was brutal, and then their spouses, and the death penalty is on the table. I don't know a way around it, like I said, unless you want to blame, find someone to blame. I mean, even though like John Pryor came out of the gate blaming Lori, in the end he blamed the police, he blamed the FBI, he blamed the raccoon, he blamed the Seven Gatherers, he blamed Melanie Gibb. Like, there's only one person really, I think, in the end that they're going to see is responsible for this.
And don't forget the DNA on the tools, which we heard about last year. But again, that just solidifies it, that it makes sense. These are tools in his shed, and it's got her DNA and tissue on it. It's a slam dunk case. There's no way around it. I mean, he's toast. This is all formality at this point.
Yeah. All right, ladies, I just want to end on a positive note. I'm going to share something about Joel really quickly. This is from Gretchen. I was at Joel and Carm's book signing in Boston. It was yesterday. He had 2 different events. They really are that funny and nice in person. It was worth the hour-plus drive. Thank you, Gretchen. We love you. Plus, I got to spend the day with my hubby. Great day. Thank you so much to Gretchen. I just wanted to share this really quickly. This is a photo of Joel and his mom. If you guys don't know, they have a book out. It's called Surviving the Survivor. It really is a phenomenal story. It's not just about the Holocaust. It's about surviving the loss of a son, the loss of a husband of 60 plus years. It's a story of resilience and optimism. And it's a very honest conversation with Joel and Carm. And if you guys know Joel and Carm, you should definitely consider getting it. It really is an enjoyable read. And I just want to point out that that person standing up on the lower photo, that is the legendary mine hunter, Dr. Ann Burgess. She's absolutely amazing. She showed up in Boston. She introduced Joel and Carmela at the event. She's just such a pleasure. So I just wanted to thank Dr. Burgess for always believing and supporting Joel and Carm, and for being so gracious and kind and for showing up. She's also in her mid 80s and kicking major butt, still working in true crime and covering different legal cases. So I just wanted to give her a big shout out. And again, thank you to all of you guys for being here. This is a quick little shout out to Joel and Carm. They also did their Audible book version, which means if you want to hear the book, Carm and Joel spent weeks and weeks and weeks reading this, so you can hear it. It is on Amazon and on Audible. And I also want to give a very big shout out to all of the mods on all of our channels. You guys are phenomenal. We appreciate you guys. You guys go to all of our different channels and support each of us. So I just want to thank all of you guys. And also remind you guys that Lauren and Gigi are both going to be there covering this case. Lauren's been there the whole time. Gigi's been watching the whole time from home, but is going to be there in person. So please check out Hidden True Crime and also Pretty Lies and Alibis. And again, this is our second channel. This is the Surviving the Survivor Trials channel, but we also have a main channel, Surviving the Survivor. So please subscribe to us, hit the like button, and support all of our channels. All three of us will be at CrimeCon in Nashville. So we are going to have an in-person reunion. We all saw each other last CrimeCon, which was in Orlando. So I think we are going to be planning some kind of meetup. So if you guys are going to CrimeCon, stay tuned, because I'm going to try to coordinate something with all of us so that we can try to meet all of the gems and alibiers and STS Nation, because I think that would be a really fun meetup. Gigi, a closing statement, last words, anything?
I'm just ready for this to be over. And then we have Arizona for Charles and Brandon. And then, I think for me, I'm ready for Kay and Larry and everybody, Colby, everybody affected by all of this to have some time without judicial stuff hanging over their head. And then they can move on and try to find some normalcy that, and my heart goes out to them, because they're not grieving in a way normal victims' families get to grieve. They're grieving on a world stage. Everybody has watched this process with them. I just hope that they get some peace and quiet. They can honor these kids and Charles and Tammy, for her family, the way they need to for themselves. But it's been a long haul. It's been nearly 4 years now. So time to wrap this stuff up. And I'm just curious if Chad eventually will get charged in Arizona. They waited till after Lori stuff was finished last year, and you had that one person on the stand. I thought he should have been charged. Also, there's no statute of limitations in Arizona. I thought that might have been a hint. So curious to see what happens. But for this trial, again, just justice for everybody. JJ, Tally, Tammy, and Charles. And so I can't wait to be there next week, and very full circle to be there, and also get to see some of my favorite humans, such as Miss Lauren. So looking forward to being there and bringing it to you for my listeners. And I know they all switch between Lauren and me and everybody and Nate. So it's a group effort. So hopefully next week we'll be able to keep bringing it to you. And maybe we see some kids on the stand next week while I'm there. Just crossing my fingers, just saying.
Thank you so much, Gigi. And Lauren Maya says, I'm loving Lauren's coverage of this case too. My eyes have been way opened to Chad. So Lauren, what are your closing statements? Obviously, you've been there since day one in person. Anything to leave us with?
Yeah, thank you. That was a kind comment. I couldn't have said it better than Gigi, but I just, this is a case. Everyone has their case, and this is my husband and I started on this case when we started our first podcast in 2020. It was actually before the children's bodies were even found. They were still missing at that time. It's been a long journey, and I'm so grateful so many family and people affected by these two will see justice. I do believe that we will see justice. It's heavy. It's real. This is the true and true crime. That true is such an important word in what we all do. And I am grateful to see this full circle. Thank you for that comment. I just want to share, when my husband and I started our podcast, he's a criminal and forensic psychologist, and has been doing that for 30 years. And I was a TV reporter. That's exactly how it started. Is our first 5 podcasts, well, the world was focusing on Lori. I think our first 5 podcasts were about Chad. And even though we're getting yelled at, talk about Lori, even I was yelling at my husband, can we talk about Lori yet? He's like, no, Chad. And so this is I just a long time coming, a full circle moment. And thank you for those that support the family in this, and may JJ and Tylee and Tammy never, ever be forgotten. Charles too, but this isn't his trial yet. So Tammy, JJ, and Tylee, I hope we see justice, and then I hope, that let's never forget them. Let's never ever forget them.
True. We can laugh about these stupid things like the text and everything, but really at the end of the day, I mean, 4 people are dead. Because because obvious reasons. There were storms brewing and all that, but
dark humor is good. It gets us through. Dark humor can get us through.
It does get us through. Gallows humor, I talked to family and they're like, I'm all for it because you have to laugh sometimes, but ultimately it's just for me, the lost innocence, what JJ could have become, what Tylee was so close to becoming as a 16-year-old, nearly an adult, Tammy, grandkids, Charles, raising JJ. It's just, it really is such a loss. And, but yeah, we started the podcast today. They found the kids' bodies back when I had a co-host, Fruit Loop. So it is full circle for us. You guys started, before they found them, but there's a lot of us that have been so invested and listeners too.
Yes.
And I think everybody just as a group's like, let's get this done. Let's get justice. He can just fade away into the bowels of the prison. And we might see some documentary every couple of years on these two. And that's it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you to both of you guys. You guys do a phenomenal job. And for full disclosure, we are airing the trial on this channel, but I also tune in and I watch you guys because you guys have been there. You guys have been covering it from day one. You guys know so much. You're invested. You know the community. You know the families affected. And so it really is meaningful to hear from both of you. And I am very lucky to know both of you guys. And I feel honored that we are able to have these conversations and learn more and hear your insights. So thank you to both of you. I just do have a quick programming note for anyone watching. If you guys have been following the Charlie Adelson saga, we do have a show tonight on our main channel, Surviving the Survivor, 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time, live with Joel Waldman, the host, and with a phenomenal lineup of best guests who are going to discuss all things Charlie. He was moved to South Dakota. Why? What's going on? What's next? All those details tonight, 5:30 p.m. We are also airing Karen Reed on our main channel, which is why we're airing Chad Daybell on this channel. It's a little confusing, a lot going on, but thank you to all of STS Nation today. Thank you to all of the gems, the alibiers, all of you guys. I know a lot of us overlap, so I just wanted to say thank you to all of you. And again, we are live tonight, 5:30 Eastern Time on the main channel with Joel. Thanks, everyone. I have to end this. Hold on.
I do a little dance while we wait.
Yeah. Give us 1 minute. Here we go. Ready? And all right. Bye, everyone. Take care.
We'll see ya.